The recent spat of kidnapping of students in Nigerian schools has reached alarming levels, with over 300 students and 12 teachers abducted from St. Mary's Catholic School in Niger State alone. The federal government, along with a majority of the 19 northern states, has shut schools to keep students safe. Now let's dive into this and just ask the most important questions. Joining us are Queen Benjamin John, a global Malala education champion, as well as Queen Uguru, who is the advocate for safe learning. Benjamin, thank you so much for joining us, and Queen, we appreciate you for joining us as well. Benjamin, if you can hear me, I just wanted to ask you first, let's just set precedents and talk about measures that can be taken to improve security in Nigerian schools to prevent future abductions. Let me start with you, Benjamin.
When patterns are built, people draw inference from patterns. And since 2014, we've witnessed an alarming rate of abductions from school. We are in a country where the number of out-of-school children is already at an alarming rate, and we continue to see barriers that make children not to go to school. We believe to be able to put an end to this, the government must come to that level where it holds the Safe Schools Declaration passionately to ensure that children, teachers, and education facilities are safe in times of conflict. In the last 1 week, we have heard of several abductions, and one of the biggest shocker was the one that happened in Kebbi and in Niger to school children. What do we think about their parents? Will they allow children to be in schools? This is just an indication that in the next few years, we'll be looking at an increased number of out-of-school children as a result of this menace. So the government at all levels, from the federal government level to the state government level, and even to the local government level, now that we have the local government autonomy, must put systems in place for early warning systems and also for the safety of schools. We understand that this must be done, otherwise we will have continuous rate of children that will be abducted from schools if care is not taken, and it will only lead to an increase in the number of out-of-school children.
As we're talking about numbers out of school children, let me bring in Queen now. He just talked about increasing security because we're just going to continue to widen that gap when it comes to children in schools, right? But how can the government then balance the need to ensure their students' safety with the importance of providing education to Nigerian children, especially in the north? It seems to be they need to juggle the two, to provide safety, but also ensure education. How can they balance it out, Queen?
So for me, I think the balance is simple. We must ensure that education and safety should go together. So when we talk about these school closures, it should not be the last resort, because we know that if they happen, it means that a lot of young people will lose their normal routine, and girls would start to experience more increase in teenage pregnancy and then even domestic labor. So it needs to be balanced, and for it to be balanced, parents and the communities have to be involved. So parents should know the risk, what are the risks of their children going to school? What are the security measures in place? What are the next steps? So the government has closed down schools now, but it should not be open-ended. So what are the next steps? When is school going to resume? We also need ministries to work together. Education alone cannot fix this. It is important that the security, social welfare, child protection, they must all be involved in this plan. And I just want to say that balancing education and safety is not totally straightforward, because we know that girls are going to be the hardest that will be hit. So anytime there's disruption like this, girls are the first ones that are pulled out of schools and the last ones, allowed to return. So, and parents become very protective because they are fearing the repercussions of their children going to school. So right now, we must prioritize safety, but we cannot also treat education as if it's something that can pause indefinitely. So there has to be a plan. When are the children returning back to school? What is the government going to do? So, and how will they keep children engaged in this period? Will they use radio learning? Will there be community learning hubs? Were the students even given take-home materials? Questions like that are what we should be asking at this time. And I want to also highlight this. So keeping girls in school is also one of the most strongest protective tools that we have when it comes to things like child marriage and teenage pregnancy. So this cannot be indefinite. Government must have a plan, to balance education and safety. Thank you.
Queen, I'm glad you said something about, all ministries need to work together, whether it's the agencies, the security agencies, and the Ministry of Education. And so let's talk about that synergy. Benjamin, I want to bring you in. What would that synergy look like if we're bringing in all the ministries and this time the army, as well as, the police and the Ministry of Education, and also at the state level as well? What would it look like to have a wholesome school experience? Would the media also be involved in terms of radio classes and education?
Yes. So just like Queen mentioned, there has to be an alternative to school closures. Since this event happened, we have been hearing a lot of school closures, both those that were real and even those that were fake, and the Federal Minister of Education had to debunk those rumors. Talking about that connection, that linkages, we need to have an interministerial or maybe interagency collaboration to ensure that, number one, the attacks on schools is reduced. Number two, what is the continuity of learning when there is risk? Already we're at that point where there is risk now. How do children continue to learn? How do the media come in to ensure that children are able to have airwaves, radio airwaves, to be able to have lessons done? We've practicalized that in Maiduguri, in Borno State, during the period of COVID when schools were locked down. We need to see other agencies coming, technological firms, Airtel, MTN, coming up to put in systems that data can be affordable for children to be able to learn using smartphones, and then children in low-risk environments are able to also learn through different variety models of maybe IVR, that's interactive voice response technology, or radios being distributed with pre-recorded lessons. We also want to see how the government will also partner with security agencies to ensure that they prevent. We don't want to get to that level where we begin to talk about putting the alternatives. How do we start preventing? What kind of linkages do we have at the state levels between the government, security agencies, the civilian joint task force like in Borno State, or other security outfits in other states, to ensure that there is that collaboration, that every school, wherever it's located, it's safe. And before we even talk about safety, there are some of these schools which we believe probably are in high-risk environments. We have to assess those environments. And if those environments are not safe for schools to remain, it's better we close down those schools so that we don't also put children at risk. So that the government is accountable to whatever school that is open. Each school that is open, the government is accountable and has put in measures through that collaboration with different agencies to ensure that schools are safe. Let us not ignore the role of communities. The communities have a very big role to play when it comes to school safety. So when we're talking about collaboration, it's a whole school approach that must come. Both the teachers, the students, the community, SBMCs, PTAs, the government, security agencies, the media, and every other stakeholders that is involved when it comes to running and managing a school. All those must be put in place. First, to put measures to prevent attacks on school. Secondly, to put measures to ensure that there is continuity of learning even when there is an attack. And then thirdly, to ensure that schools continue when the risk is reduced. Thank you.
I don't know if Queen is back with us. Queen, you're there. For your final remarks, right? As we know that Kaduna State have now mentioned that their schools will be closing November 27th, and all first-term examinations must be done before that time, and all schools in the state will close so far. Now, schools will definitely close before the first week of December, especially in the north, and for those who are in the southwest and southeast, we're looking at between the first and second week of December, right? For the schools who were closed earlier, what would be a precondition to open it? I think now we need to prefer solutions and talk about what it would look like before the schools can be reopened. What are the measures that need to be taken, but also what would be preconditions for it to be suitable to open them? Queen, let me start with you.
Okay, so I think it's important that we understand that security in the schools is more than fences or guards. So it needs to be like a community-driven approach, and it has to be layered. First of all, each schools, we need to conduct like a proper risk assessment, know where they are vulnerable in terms of security, and then we need a functional security. What we see in most schools in the rural areas is that they just hire security guards that do not know much about security. So they need to be properly trained. Schools also need to have controlled entry points. If there is any leakage in the fencing or anything, that needs to be curbed. The school should also be properly lit, proper fencing, and these are even the minimum. But we also need communities to come in as partners. So maybe government can set in community child protective committees in each communities that can help detect these threats before they even become attacks. Because I believe that somehow some people might have even perceived of these incoming threats, to the schools. So, and schools should then have emergency plans. So in the instance where you've received the threats, what is your emergency plan? How do you plan to keep the children safe? How do you even plan to communicate with the parents so that there is no panic? Right. And then in long term, like Mr. Benjamin has said, we need to look at how we design where we build our schools. So we find out that especially boarding schools, government-owned boarding schools, are in isolated areas, which should not be so. So we need safer locations for the schools, train the teachers in child protection, train the security men. There should be proper trauma response. So when this happens, who counsels the children? And then for girls most especially, we need proper reporting mechanisms with this safe transport, to and fro schools.
All right.
I think if these are done, we can begin to make a step in the right direction.
Right. Benjamin, just very quickly, your final thoughts. We have less than 30 seconds, quickly.
Yeah, so the federal government has the national minimum standards for safe schools. And that document needs to be domesticated by every state in the country. Not just domesticated on paper, but also implemented. And talking about implementation, trainings, not just trainings for breakfast meals, but to ensure that schools understand, the communities understand what to do when schools are at the verge of being attacked, or to conduct drills. Early warning systems need to be set up in all of those schools to ensure that these schools are already ready for things like this. We had what happened yesterday in the Maiduguri school, the girls' school in Maiduguri. And when they just saw a panic, we saw all the children just run out of the school. And the Commissioner of Education had to come in and intervene with some security forces. We need to see how schools put in systems so that when these things happen, they already know the right step to take. They already panicked. And I believe that if trainings are done in schools, if they see things like this, they will know the right step to take in the right direction.
All right.
Thank you.
I must say thank you, Benjamin, for taking out the time to join us. Benjamin John, the Executive Director of Casford Nigeria, as well as Queen Ugure, who's an advocate for safe learning. Lady and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.